Adam, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Do you want to start by taking us through your early days as an entrepreneur and sort of your starting points?
It's always hard to know where to start this story because there's a few potential starting points. Like, is it grade 5 when you're selling all these on the school bus? Is it year 12, first year uni, when we started selling our VCE assignments to people? For us, the starting point was I was a lawyer. Jez, my co-founder, was a trader at ANZ. And we started our first business, which was a backpacker apartments business back in 2004. So Melbourne Cup weekend, 2004. And it was a business we could start with virtually no capital. We thought there could be a market there. So this is before the days of Y Combinator Start Mate. So there was no real path for entrepreneurs back then. Back then, being an entrepreneur was Alan Bond was it wasn't. Now being a founder was cool. Back to that 20 years ago, being a founder wasn't cool at all. Being a founder was almost, you failed in profession. You couldn't become a lawyer, you couldn't become a doctor, you couldn't become a banker. You become an entrepreneur. Now it's almost the opposite, which is amazing. So I was a lawyer, Jez was a banker, and we started our first little business. We didn't quit our job straight away. It was a side hustle before side hustles were invented. Started this backpacker apartments. We launched our first one, had no idea what we were doing, never moved out of home. So rent an apartment, buy furniture, fill the apartment, all that stuff. Learned on the job, literally. So did the first apartment, did a second one. We actually did a furnished one. So you have to buy the furniture. And we just ran them for a couple of months to see, is there product market fit? And we didn't know what product market fit was, but
all these terms weren't really around, were they?
None of them were.
What year is this, Adam?
End of 2004, early 2005. So I was still working at Freehills, big law firm. Just maybe was finishing up at ANZ, was emotionally still there. And then probably come April, there seems to be some sort of product market fit. People were making money. The first apartment we had, we were making like 20 grand a year. And that was an issue. We never made that much money again, but basically on the arbitrage between what you pay to rent long-term and what you can rent it out short-term. What we didn't realize was that stuff was really seasonal. So we weren't really making that much because during winter, you have to dump the price. Demand just drops off a cliff. I wouldn't know that because it was like April, just before winter. So we started, we went full-time at the worst possible time. It was a great baptism of fire. We went from 2 apartments to like 30 or 40 in a year. So we're just cash flowing each apartment because we didn't have to buy it. Rent the apartments, there's a bond, but that was pretty small. So it cost us about 5 grand, which we kept. So we had 70 grand of savings, which we tapped all the way into, and then we cash flowing. So become cash flow positive in 6 months. There were some real issues with the business, but it was cash flow positive. We got to sort of a couple of $1 million in turnover within a couple of years from nothing with very little capital. So that was great. We weren't making that much money, but it was a nice cash flow business. We were 24, 25, our first business. A couple of years later, we just had the rental market tightened. So owners became much more reluctant to rent us apartments. And we had an issue with one big landlord who was a bit duplicitous and sort of double-crossed us. So there's a few issues there. The nature of backpacker apartments was some regulatory grey area. So we weren't rooming houses. It was just becoming more and more difficult. So we flipped to corporate apartments, which everybody loved. So the landlords loved it. Generally one person per apartment. It was much easier for us. And we started our business. We actually bought half a dozen apartments using a lot of leverage. Because we didn't have that much money. We were making a bit of money in the business, but didn't have that much. Almost complete leverage to buy these apartments. We would hate debt. So a couple of years later, we sold them and we had $1 million in windfall gains just from buying and selling and positive gearing and timing it right. Neither of us love buying property. We only bought a house like 4 years ago now, so much later. We used the cash to fund businesses. So I went from that business and then came across a business called Top Table, which is effectively like a book a restaurant, open table style business in the UK. I thought this was a combination between particularly Open Table and the Entertainment Book. So you could book discounted restaurant tables. This is before this whole concept didn't exist. But we'll do this in Australia.
Entertainment Book, there you go.
The Entertainment Book definitely existed, but it wasn't online at the time. So it was combining the discounted Entertainment Book and the online bookability that exists now everywhere. 7 rooms. There's 50 of them. And we started doing that and realized this is fast forward 2009, 2010. And we actually saw Groupon in the States, and Groupon was flying. Quickest business hit $1 billion in turnover. Everybody loved it. And we thought that's an easier business to scale than this restaurant thing, which you needed to build the marketplace. It was going to be really expensive. You're going to eat into that $1 million we made really quickly. Pivoted to the Groupon thing, called it Zoupon, maybe changed the name to deals.com, and just had a running start. That business grew really quickly. There were some real flaws with it, but the business grew super quickly. We had like 30 people in a year employed. I think it was $20 million in sales. So it grew really quickly, but we could tell really quickly the unit economics of that business, and there was a bit of product market fit, but generally it was a really challenged product market fit and definitely no competitive advantage. So there was 80 competitors, margins being drilled down significantly, really tough business. You're dealing with vendors who some were great, some were terrible. So we still have a bit of that business in luxury safety experiences, but we now cherry pick the best vendors. Back then we worked with anyone. There were genuine frauds who would steal your money. There were people who meant well but were hopeless, and there were good people. So it was really hard business. Customers would have great experience and a bad experience and blame you. And so you just didn't have the lifetime value you get with great businesses. But as part of that, we saw travel was a really good vertical. So all the problems we had with experiences, we call it sort of low-end experiences. We didn't have a travel, much higher basket size, much better unit economics, and much better customer satisfaction because you did hotels who really care about hospitality and reputation. So the problems we had with that sort of low-rent experience business, now we have a market experience business, which goes really well. But back then it was a low-rent business and it just didn't work. But travel worked really well. So that's kind of the 5-minute story of how we got to luxury escapes.
Yeah, of the iteration through to that. And so what sort of time frame did that take you to when you sort of realized this vertical is somewhere where we really want to be?
Realized pretty quickly. So deals or Zoopon deals launched 2010. We then bought a bunch of businesses. 2011, we bought someone. 2012, we bought someone. So 2012, 2013, we bought something from Channel 9 called Kudo. 2014, we bought Brands Exclusive. 2015, we bought them. So we went from 25 people to 50. To 100, to 300, to like 5. Like we really quickly grew. Problem with that the non-travel part of the business was really challenged. The product, the e-commerce part, so we had a fashion homewares business, really hard businesses to run. It's fashion especially. Like almost no one, we talk about satire a bit, and our pod we talk about satire. They've sort of done okay, but the jury's very much still out there. But take out satire, nobody's succeeded in this sort of fashion online discount space. Just almost impossible to get it right. Farfetch overseas is had to sell for a fire sale at Coupang. Like it's been really hard. And we struggled like everyone else. The homewares business was a bit better, but we just didn't have scale. So we sold those businesses to catch the day later on and bought that travel. We did an asset swap in 2017. But so this 2011, 12, 13, we were growing the core experiences business. And we realized that time travel was a really good vertical. And we launched Luxury Escapes 2013. 2010, 2013 was us realizing travel was the best vertical, but running it within deals.com.au. Spun out Luxury Escapes 2013, and that was really a hotel-facing brand. Yeah, clearly it was a customer-facing brand as well, but we changed it because hotels wanted to be in a really nice environment where we could really protect their brand, and that was what Luxury Escapes became.
And in terms of that process, when did that become the real focus? Was it when you spun it out, or was it going to be the focus for a while there and you just sort of had to bide your time? What's the...
Good question. Should have become the focus quicker. So it was the majority of my time, but I spent a heap of time in these other businesses as well. So it wasn't just Lux. It wasn't until 2017 that we sold the other businesses. Or we did a JV with Experiences and kept the best bits. And now Experiences is part of Luxury Escapes. And it's actually pretty good business, makes money, grows nicely. A really great add-on to our travel business. So it works particularly Experiences for travel and a standalone Experiences business. A really good, nice little business there. It's growing nicely and a really good team. But we used to have, I think, like hundreds of people in that business. Now there's like 15. But it makes money now and it's a nice size and a really great complement to Luxury Escapes. And Luxury Escapes now has 600 people. So that's sort of grown as the other business strong. But yeah, 13, 14, 15, we were growing Luxury Escapes nicely, and 17 became the real focus.
And in terms of when you go from being a couple of young blokes sort of starting a business and you then go from scaling up so quickly to managing hundreds of people, not a very long time frame. So the learning curve is steep. Do you want to just take us through that a little bit in terms of how do you adapt and grow in that environment?
It's a really good question because I don't actually know exactly how we did it. We kind of just learn on the job. And because we grew initially a lot through like Luxury Escapes has been almost purely organic. So we haven't really we kind of bought Getaway Lounge early days. That was a very, very small business, but really it's completely organic. So we haven't bought anything. So a lot of it's like, if you look at our earlier business, we went from 50 to 100 people from buying a 50-person business, 100, 200 by buying 100%. That was very much by M&A. And you sort of we learned really quickly how to do M&A and how not to. So there's effectively two parts of the M&A challenge to get right. And most M&A, 75%, 80% M&A doesn't work. And we learned and most of our M&A didn't work either. A couple really did work, but most didn't, because there's two. There's the tech challenge. And a lot of times businesses do M&A, they don't even bother with tech. They just run multiple systems, which is ridiculous because a big synergy is being able to have one system. So we were always very keen so we bought Brands Exclusive, the fashion business. We put them on our platform, which was a bit of a mess because they're very different businesses. When we bought Getaway Lounge, we created a travel platform and put them on our travel platform. So, which was Luxury Escapes. So one was so Josh, one of my co-founders, would work on tech integration. He was a great product guy. And we helped have a tech team. And then I'd work and focus more on the people side. So one thing we're always really keen to do is we'd speak to the team before we did the deal. We'd work out who are the really key people in the business or the people that were probably a bit superfluous to what we needed. and who are our people where we could get someone better in. And how do we make sure we really focus on keeping, because often what happens is you buy a business, good people leave, but the less good people stay. We would be laser focused. How do we keep these great people? We bought Living Social 10 years ago. We've still got some great people from that business. One of our really key operations heads just celebrated 10 years with us. So keeping that really great talent for as long as we can was a real focus. So we became a lot better at that. But even with that, acquisitions is something that we don't focus on. If there's a really opportunistic growth, synergistic acquisition, we'll do it. But we've been really focused on growing organically. And when you grow organically, it's much easier to just grow a bigger team one by one. So you're slowly growing. It's just about picking really great people. There's a whole thing of the Brian Chester and the mode thing, and just thinking about that. There's one founder of this, and there's 599 other people. We've got to be able to retain and hire great people at those levels. Despite being a real founder myself, I think the founder mode thing's ridiculous. Great founders hire great people to make them great founders. So the notion there's a founder and a manager, and managers bad and founders good, is completely ridiculous, because a great founder relies on great managers. Without 100 great managers in this business, and they're entrepreneurs. We want every manager to be a founder in themselves. We want every person in this business consider themselves an entrepreneur. So we very much want to create that day one founder culture through the business. So if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, there's 50 people who can stand up and do what I did.
Yeah. Is it easier to grow and integrate teams as you're building organically, or is it through M&A, or are they just different? Sounds like it's easier in some respects to do that organically. But the part of that question I was more interested in was when you do the M&A side, I guess you're bringing in entire teams with management in place. And if they're good managers, I guess that solves part of that problem. Or is it not? Does it not work out that way necessarily?
Well, I think that's right. I think that there's, as Warren Buffett says, you're much better buying a good business for a fair price than a bad business for a cheap price. And the better the business, the better the managers. So we've bought some really good businesses, and even the businesses that haven't been that great, still had some great people in there. You've got to find those gems and make sure you keep them, bring them in. We've got a lot of great team members through. We've obviously hired lots of great team members, and most of my ELT has been directly hired, not through acquisition. We've had some great senior managers who we've got from acquisition over the years, and really brought a heap of skill set into the business. So super grateful to be able to do that over the years. So it's a real combination. They're not mutually exclusive. I think you want both. Often the best acquisitions are acqui-hires. I think that we spend a lot of time on our podcast talking about great acquisitions, which is the acquired podcast. I'm not sure if it's that, but they talk about the great acquisitions. And I spend a lot of time thinking, what are the great acquisitions? Think of the two best, I don't know if you think of the two best acquisitions of all time. Probably the number one is Next, and that was Apple buying Next, which brought Steve Jobs back in. Without that, there'd be no Apple. It's a $3.2 trillion acquisition. Best of all time. Probably the second best acquisition of all time is probably Google buying Android. And Android was a $60 million acquisition. Think how much Google pays Apple for having Google on Safari and other Apple devices. It's probably worth $1 trillion to Google, that Android acquisition. Paid 60. So the two best acquisitions were effectively acqui-hires in both.
Yeah, there's a lot of businesses out there that you sort of gets lost in the course of time, where they've been acquisitions and brought the key people in, and after a while you do forget where they came from, right?
Absolutely. Booking.com, the best travel business on earth that we look to for a lot of inspiration. We'll compete against them in a way, but they're multiples at the $130 billion US business. So they're giant, the biggest travel business in the world. Actually, Google's the biggest travel business in the world, the second biggest travel business, the biggest exclusive travel business. And that was a business called Priceline that bought a business called Booking for $300 million in 2003. So Booking is now, like, Priceline's worth zero, and Booking is the entire value. So that was not as good, probably as good as Next and Android, but in terms of like acquisitions, that is probably the greatest e-commerce acquisition of all time. And that was just buying a business that was much smaller at the time, became the entire thing.
Yeah, transformative acquisitions, right? I mean,
absolutely
quite incredible. In terms of building the team, how did you go adapting to that, where you've got small numbers of people, and I imagine every order of magnitude you go from 6 to 60, 600 is a big change.
I've been super lucky. I've been running this business for 14 years now. Less a year when I sort of stepped out for a year or so, we had a CEO come in, then during COVID, I came back, and that was a great learning experience. But there's lots of things you're not good at as a founder, and there's a few things you're good at. Like, you generally got to be pretty good at product. If you're not a good product person, if you're not a good salesperson, you're probably not going to be a great founder. But the one thing I like to try and focus on is constantly learning. And Reid Hoffman talks about being I can't forget his exact term, but effectively a constant learner. I think as a CEO, especially a founder CEO, you're constantly, your skill set's pretty narrow coming into the business as a founder, and you've just got to broaden the skill set every year. If you don't keep broadening your skill set, then you've got to leave. So there'll be a time could be tomorrow, could be 10 years, could be 20 years, where I'm not adding enough value to this business and somebody else can add more value as the CEO. I've got to be able to recognize that. And it's always pretty hard. But for me to keep running this, it's not going to keep learning and keep growing as a leader. And that's function one sort of thing is obviously you got a bigger team, but often as you get a bigger team, job becomes easier because you've got better people and you got more good people when there's 8 of you and you're doing everything, that's super hard. When there's 600 and you've got 50 amazing managers, then it's a much easier role. So we launched a Lux Plus subscription product 3-4 months ago. It's been a really successful launch, probably 6 years in the making in some way, but probably, I don't know, 18 months ago, one of my senior leaders who's been with us for 10 years is a fantastic guy and a really good leader. Said, check out this site. This would be a great product. So he came up with, we had the idea for loyalty. He came up with a really interesting concept and I was able to take that concept and come up with a fulsome concept and I just handed it off to the team to execute. So and obviously I was involved in execution, but in a really tiny way, but I was able to sort of take one idea, transform it into an idea and then handball it off to an amazing team, which is a great place to be as a camper. So I hadn't had to do all the execution work and I was involved in all the product and all that kind of stuff, but an amazing team building it, amazing team launching it. And I could be involved in the fun stuff, which was the ideation and the product creation and understanding how will this impact customers and then how do we change and iterate the product after launch. So that was the really good stuff and be able to work with a really great team. So the challenge of being a founder is and a manager is how do you find those amazing people to execute and do a great job, which is hard.
Yeah. I'm curious, when you talked about earlier, you need to be able to add value to the business or else you're not necessarily the right person for the job anymore. But on the flip side of that is if you're curious and constantly growing, talking about that Reid Hoffman type mentality, which presumably you have, where's that inflection point? Because presumably every step of the way you're learning more and deeply learning around all these other areas and growing. So at what point does it become an issue where you're not keeping up with the business, or is it just an interest issue where you're not as interested in some of that place, the place where it has to go, rather than not being capable? Do you know what I mean? Like what's the difference?
They're probably linked in a way. You probably lose interest when you're not contributing. And the question is, when does that occur and are you able to recognize it? Hopefully I can. Hopefully it hasn't happened yet, but that's a great question. I think it's probably a question because I'm in the thick of it. There aren't that many founders who stick around longer than even 5 years. I've been super lucky to have been able to be in this role for 13 or 14 years and hopefully longer. There clearly will be a time where I'm not adding enough value to justify me staying in this role. Maybe you move to a different role. And I think of the great founders far better than me. The Jeff Bezos he was CEO for 26 years, 1994 to 2022, I guess, 27 years. Bill Gates actually wasn't that long. So he handed over Steve Ballmer 90s. So he was like 19 years. So these are the great CEOs. Like probably the great Jensen Huang is now the greatest CEO. He's now 1983. He's 41 years. But I think you can't assume you're going to be Jensen. He went from Denny's busboy to running NVIDIA. He's probably him and Bezos, probably the 2 greatest CEOs you've ever seen. I don't think we can't assume we're going to be that. So there is definitely a point where I think when you're not contributing to the product, and you don't understand the customers well anymore, I think you also know when you lose the staff, and hopefully staff tap you and say, we think it's time, let's get somebody else. And rest of them, you're senior leaders and you're to the next level. But I think as long as senior leaders have confidence in you, that's probably the most important metric. So when you lose your leadership team, like a coach losing the players, that's when it's time.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a good analogy, actually. Coach losing the players. I think that's an easy one to recognize when that happens in sport, right? Probably a lot less so in business.
Definitely.
What about the industry? How's it changed since you started? Sort of, you've got mobile. Well, that one, I talk about mobile, but that's been around a lot longer than we think sometimes these days. They happen slowly and quickly and then slowly in the other way. Well, how has the industry changed?
Depending where you look at our starting point, if you go back to 2013, it hasn't actually changed that much. We've seen the rise of bed banks small. We've seen Booking.com become much more increasingly dominant. We've had online travel agents, OTAs, since 2000 really. Orbitz, Expedia, Booking, Priceline. That hasn't really changed that much. Mainstream travel agents, everybody thought they were going to die. They'd held on. Flights is still an amazing business. Hello World's still a pretty decent business. Travel Bag in the UK. There's a few other businesses in the UK. Surprisingly, travel has not changed. I think people called the death of Main Street travel agents 15 years ago very wrongly. They are doing better than ever.
Does that surprise you?
No, it doesn't, because I think they add great value. And the travel trade initially really didn't like luxury escapes. They thought we were a competitor. We were trying to steal our business. We never thought of that. We thought of ourselves as working with the trade. And now we actually literally work with the trade and we sell to them so they can buy luxury escapes for us and get commission on it. So we They're very much a partner. We have our own agency and retail store, which is a one-off sort of Apple-like store in Chadstone Shopping Centre in Melbourne. We think of ourselves as a friend of the trade, and we want to work with the trade. And we think the trade will reign. The value you get from a travel agent is immense. I'm not just talking about that generally. So if you're somebody $20,000, you want to go on a trip, you can get thousands of dollars of value for free from a travel agent. They will make money from commission. So you can pay a booking.com or even us if you know what you're doing, or you can go to a travel agent, and we have hundreds of travel agents who work in our business. So you can call us up and speak to a travel agent, or you can book it yourself. But if you really don't know what you're doing, walk into a local travel agent. They'll give you a heap of value for nothing. And it's a really great way to book your travel. You've got to have a de minimis level. If you're doing a $500 Jetstar flight, they're not going to really want to help you because they're not making any money there. But if you're booking a $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 trip, then absolutely you can get really good value from an agent. And we kind of sit in the middle. So yes, we do the really expensive big trips, but we can do your $1,000 trips online really easily, or you can call someone up. So we're sort of a mass market travel agent in many ways. So we got all the efficiency of an online travel agent like booking, but all the service of a flight center or a higher end travel agent. So we think we sort of cross that mass stage level. We've been able to grow on the back of really great service and really great product.
When the business was in its early days, did you raise capital initially, or did you think about that? At what point did that become something that you realized was important to the business?
We thought about it a lot, and we tried quite a few times. We're never able to. Pre-becoming travel only, the business was a bit of a mess. So it was, the beauty thing is we were a negative working capital business. We didn't need capital. So we were able to grow based on profitability and based on the fact we got paid from our customers before we had to pay our hotel partners. Really, like an insurance company.
Yeah. Perfect.
We eventually raised capital post-COVID just because COVID hit the balance sheet. We lost a bunch of money during COVID. So we had no choice. But for COVID, we would have still been bootstrapped for sure. So we raised just over $100 million, of which a fair bit came out of secondary. This is about 2 years ago. And we had about 60 million come into the business. So this is all public, nothing new, nothing that we haven't announced before. But for, and obviously really great support of shareholders in Orctus who've been fantastic for the business. But for COVID, we would have been bootstrapped.
What are the key considerations in terms of who you brought in as that partner, as that investor?
Yeah, so we did a process pre-COVID, and obviously COVID interrupted that process. And work with Orctus. Orctus are a publicly listed, effectively fund manager. They raise funds for each investment. I've known Campbell for many years, really like him. He's been a fantastic director and guide for the business. They're just a great fit for us, great personality fit, very similar investment views, philosophies, like a medium to long-term view, not trying to make a quick buck, trying to build a really strong business and get a great return for their fund unit holders into that 5-year period. So we had a bit more time. They weren't a quick in and out VC trying to make a quick buck. They were a long-term patient investor that really shared a lot of philosophies with us. So we had a great synergy with them, liked all the team, great team to work with, and Campbell still sits on our board, and we work closely with them and get great guidance from them. So they've been a great partner of ours, and they've brought a bunch of sort of unit holders who have been amazing. So we've got some amazing business people who are unit holders, about 300 or so unit holders in that fund. So we deal with Orctus sort of shareholder, but there's some really great shareholders in that fund who we're happy to speak to and get advice from, and a lot of great footballers and celebrities and business people who've invested. And we're very flattered they trusted us with their capital, and we want to make sure that we give a great return to them when the time comes.
Where did your knowledge come in terms of that process? It sounds like you were a fair bit ahead of a lot of founders in terms of understanding what you wanted. So when I asked the question of sort of what that process was like, you sound like you really knew what you wanted from it. Whereas a lot of people starting out, the capital raising part of it is daunting because they haven't been through the process before. So they look at this money from private equity or venture capital or private investors. You can do all these different types of things. It sounds like you didn't really need to go through that process in the same and work out the pros and cons. You sound like you really already knew what a lot of the cons were. You don't want money from there. You don't want money from there. Is that right? Like you already understood that sort of thing?
I was an M&A lawyer initially, although the knowledge I got from that there was some knowledge, but I wouldn't say it was extensive, just from doing it. So we were running businesses for sort of 14, 15 years and you just pick stuff up. So there's a lot of I didn't know. And we actually ran a couple of IPO processes. We aborted them but relatively early, but you learn a bit there around the PE process. So as you run these processes, and every month I'm speaking to something like a potential investor, not necessarily about investing now, but maybe they're investing in 2, 3, 4, 5 years time. But I've been doing that for 7 or 8 years. So probably speaking to a couple of hundred investors. Also exec chaired a business called Bookwell during my year off from running this Lux business. And we raised venture money there. So I was in that process, doing the model, speaking to 72 different potential investors. So I was lucky enough to do that process outside my business, and you learn a lot in that process, doing decks, doing models, team investors, tweaking the model, tweaking the assumptions, getting it right. That was a great learning experience. So it's just a matter of doing it. But nobody knows that much going in. Like nobody's an expert. You just got to do it, get out there, speak to people. Some investors are really smart, really helpful. Some investors are terrible. Learn from the smart ones, ignore the terrible ones. There are some generally very good investors out there. We're lucky. Every shareholder I've ever had in all our businesses has been really helpful, really great. In Booker, we had sort of 30 odd investors, my friends at Aura who are amazing, who are great to work with, to some really great high net worths, to some friends and family. So we had some great people on that register, and there's some great people on our luck register as well. They've been super smart. Some ex-investment banker who's super smart and gives great views and great guidance. So yeah, there's lots of smart people we've had luck, fortunate enough to work with. We haven't had too many bad shareholders. We get one or two along the way, but generally they're mostly pretty helpful.
How do you rule that sort of stuff out for someone who's going into that process now for the first time? Because when you said, you listen to the smart ones and ignore the ones that aren't so good, a lot of people don't know how to do that, right? Because they don't know what a good or a bad investor looks like. So how does that? I mean, I think it's kind of obvious in some respects as well, but when people go to check and they're putting money in, how do you sort of go, actually, this guy doesn't really know what he's talking about? Because there's plenty of people caught, right, on the bringing in the wrong investor.
The people who don't know what they're talking about aren't the bad ones. You get someone who are genuinely damaging, who are in it for themselves, who are often quite sophisticated. They're the problem. The dumb, inverted commas, dumb money, which we don't really have much dumb money, or if any, but the dumb money are fine. They're usually pretty nice, pretty passive, or whatever. Yeah, it's the sometimes the more sophisticated ones who maybe are more in it for themselves than the business, the problem. And you speak to most founders that have had one or two of them along the journey. So I think and as you go through a process, most founders, or if you're not a founder or a person raising money, you generally have your gut feels usually pretty right. You usually know pretty early. Sometimes you're completely fooled, but usually you can sort of tell who's going to be a helpful partner and who's not. And but the challenge is you need to raise money. So you may have the choice. I got this pretty bad shareholder, or the company dies due to running out of runway. What do you do? Well, you're probably going to take the terrible shareholder, which is better than death. But you're kicking a problem down the road. There's no question, because a bad shareholder up front is going to be a bad shareholder throughout. And you just got to make sure that your shareholder agreement doesn't allow them to blackmail you or anything like that. And just generally pick good shareholders. And most shareholders are pretty good. Like, it's pretty rare you get a bad shareholder. And some shareholders who are challenging early become great shareholders later, and vice versa. So it's a matter of working with them and proving yourself to them. But yeah, we've got almost all our shareholders have been amazing help to us across multiple businesses. And I learned a lot from them. So I'm generally grateful for the not just the capital, but also the time.
From a leadership perspective, what's your best attribute in terms of how do you see what you bring the most value to the business?
It's pretty hard to answer that question yourself. I think probably my product customer knowledge is pretty good. Been on the coal face, remain on the coal face. I'll answer customer service when I need to. Still, I'll work with product as much as I can, because we've got some really great product managers, but if I can help on product, I will. And that's pretty common for founders. Like, usually great product people and great sales people. If you're not that, you're probably going to struggle to be a founder. So every founder's good at that. I'm probably less strong at the org design, to the big business enterprise type stuff, as most founders tend to be. You've got to kind of learn that on the job. I haven't done any sort of hard MBA stuff or anything like that. So it's very much on the job learning, and learning from brilliant chairman, Pat Sullivan and Andrew McAvoy. They've both run very big organizations. They've been really great at helping with that stuff over the years. And Pat, about 5 years ago, Andrew's been chairman about 3 or 4 years, 5 years now, 4 years, or however long. They've been a great chairman. So I've learned a lot from those two guys who have had great experience, and they've been really generous passing on that knowledge to me. So finding the right people to learn from, and just making mistakes, but just not making the same mistake twice. It's nothing wrong with making mistakes. In fact, if you're not making mistakes like skiing, you're not falling when you're skiing, you're not trying hard enough. If you're not making mistakes as a leader, you're not trying hard enough. But don't make the same mistake like 4 times. Don't keep terrible people on. If someone's not a great team member, you got to move them on quickly. Or if somebody's a great person but just not contributing like they used to, you got to move them on as well. So there can be tough conversations, tough decisions you got to make. So you just own up to them and be quick to make them. Don't stew on a decision. If the decision's right, just make it, move on. Be really quick in decision making. So it's just about constantly learning, constantly iterating, and making mistakes and learning from really smart people.
What was the most challenging time that you faced in the last sort of 14 years?
Probably 2012, we bought a business. It was a bit more leveraged than we thought. Then we bought another couple of businesses, and they were losing money. So whilst that core business was profitable, the other businesses were losing money, and we almost went to the wall, just because went to the wall while making profit with our core business is weird. So we ended up, shareholders put a loan in the business. We did a couple of great deals, got through it, and went from strength to strength. But we came pretty close to sort of touching water. But we hustled crazy hustling and got through, but just got through. And we were much stronger for it, but it was a really close run thing.
So how did that change your mindset going forward once you got out the other side of that?
It probably made us a bit more conservative just in how we manage liquidity, how close we go to the borrow. Like that wasn't intended incidentally. Like we didn't know the debt was in that business and we didn't intend to go that close to the borrow. And we never would have. Like we inherently are relatively conservative, but it's made us a little bit more cautious, especially with acquisitions and just understanding cash flow. Obviously then COVID happened and that's some issue, but that was more worrying than COVID. COVID, we were a much more developed business. If we had to, we could have raised money at a discounted level. We didn't want to. Back then, we couldn't raise money. So that was a challenge. We had to somehow bootstrap our way out of it. And we got there and Mark hustled, Josh hustled, Jez hustled. We all hustled super hard and we got there, but it was a close run team.
Yeah, okay. What do you love most about what you do?
I'm pretty lucky. We've got a super incredible team. We sell happiness. We're able to sell travel products to people around the world, many of which who haven't ever traveled before. We gave them the best holiday life. So we're really lucky that we're selling a product that people absolutely love. Like Luxuriescapes is one of the most loved travel businesses globally. And that's not because of me. There's a lot of luck involved in that and building a great team to be able to deliver an incredible product. So it's just a really fun job to do, working with amazing people, selling an amazing product. There's lots of great successful businesses selling tobacco or machine guns, like lots of money, but not a very pleasant product to be selling. We're able to have a profitable business that's growing with an amazing team, selling a product that people absolutely love. And not only are we selling a product that customers love, we're selling a product that we're working with hotels in Bali, Fiji, and Thailand, in regions that actually don't have a lot of money, that we bring a heap of money into these businesses. And as COVID came out of COVID, we really saw it. We saw hoteliers able to bring back team members who are probably living in poverty, bring back to their jobs because of Luxuriescapes, because we could deliver this incredible revenue to them. So that was a super privileged position to be in, to be able to create that much joy and happiness and livelihoods for people in really different, so people in Australia or US and developed countries traveling versus developing countries providing those services. And it's a really great business to be able to running that and super lucky that we're able to create that paradigm of creating lots of joy, lots of happiness. But we had 800,000 people travel on Luxuriescape last year. It's a significant amount of people. That's a country of people. So to be able to do that is a real honor.
And impacting lives. And like you say, that's going happiness. That's a pretty cool place to be, right? Like it doesn't really get much better than that from a day-to-day. I always remember it was a funny little conversation. I remember my dad saying once, he was talking to like the local mechanic who was tinkering with cars and doing stuff like that. And he just said to him something like, well, that must be a good business to be, in terms of what you do day to day, right? Not in terms of scale or anything, but, tinkering with the cars when you love working on that sort of stuff. He goes, no, it's a shit business. He goes, oh, well, he goes, why? He goes, because every day people just come to you with their problems because no one's ever happy because their car broke down or whatever happened to their car. And it's the opposite of that, right? So being able to sell happiness seems like a pretty cool place to be.
Yeah, and there aren't that many. There's definitely other roles to do it, but probably very few on our scale. And to be able to bring that much happiness to that many people, so there's 800,000 customers, but there's probably another 200,000 people in hotels we work with who we help. That's probably touching 1 million people a year. And obviously that great team who work with us directly. It's 1 million people who, but for the business that we're able to create, would have a less happy life. So it's a real privilege to be able to do this.
Do you have a bucket list? And are there things, if you do, are there things on there that you've ticked off that you're particularly proud of? Or are there things ahead of you that you look at and think you really want to be able to tick off one day?
I think most founders, we don't celebrate success as much. It's kind of just the success is being happiness being able to do it. The success we have, you're constantly trying to build more. We definitely want to, I can think myself, probably within 10 years, I want to sort of flick from the commercial space to the not-for-profit space. How do we create some real value in a sphere that isn't essentially that profit? Like we talk about happiness, and it's an amazing side effect, but the business exists to make money for stakeholders, create employment, and return money to shareholders. I'd love to have an enterprise that the dividend is being able to improve people's lives and not worry about profit. Obviously, Andrew Carnegie is one of the original robber barons who created libraries He who dies, which dies is grace. There's certainly a great want to be able to be as ideally more successful in the not-for-profit space than the for-profit space. Jeff Harris from Acquistions does some incredible work there. There's lots of people doing some great stuff. Instead of just donating money to other people, which is fantastic, but how do you create real value? How do we change how profits are run to create more utility there, like we've done in travel? I think I love to focus on that.
Even aside from business, in terms of from a personal goals and objectives perspective, it's luxury escapes. Do you have a place that you one day want to go to and visit that you've never visited? Or anything along those lines, just simple stuff.
We're pretty lucky. I can travel to most places. So there isn't any places I haven't been to I really want to go. We've been super lucky. Kids have probably been to like 50 countries. So yeah, I do a lot of skiing, which is amazing. So there isn't too much in that space. It's more, how can we contribute? And super lucky like you having a podcast. We can talk to 10,000 people a week or 30, 40,000 people a month in your ears in a really intimate relationship, talking about business, talking about lots of stuff that we think is relevant, talking about some general political stuff and trying to have a positive impact on people's lives that way. But we're never been overly materialistic. How do we create real value for society? We're super privileged to be able to work in this business, hopefully create some really strong capital distributions. And how do we use that capital? You don't want to give lots of money to your kids and create a curse for them. So it's how to use that hopefully that capital to create real utility for society. Because we know I'm a fervent believer in capitalism, big believer in liberal ideals, smaller liberal ideals. But the whole nature of capitalism is if you're going to accumulate lots of capital, you got to be able to give that back in a really positive way, in a more constructive way. So we know we've saw with the USSR communism doesn't work, but the principles of trying to be more fair and equal are probably right. It just being fair doesn't work because you don't create any extra value. Capitalism is the best way to create lots of value, but then it relies on the capitalists to be responsible and ethical and do the right thing for the people who allow them to create that wealth. And it's not just spending on private jets and not just living like a billionaire. It's how do you use that luck and that wealth you've been given to give back to society.
How do you think society goes in terms of finding that balance between those things? Because there's a fairly big gap between the people who do that and don't do that, right?
I think it's gotten a lot worse. I think if you look at, I think the US in many ways is a highly unfair society, but they have a bigger focus on charity. Australia is more egalitarian and the UK is more egalitarian, but I don't think they do an amazing job with it. And I think a lot of the way people think about giving isn't necessarily right. It's giving for reputational purposes, or it's giving to maybe make themselves feel better, but it's not. And ultimately, charity is inherently very selfish. You're giving away money to make yourself feel good. So let's not kid ourselves that it's purely altruistic, because there definitely is a non-altruistic element of that. And to say that charity is purely altruistic is ridiculous, because it's not. But the question is, how do you maximize the utility of your donation? So if you're going to be feeling good about yourself, that's great, but feel good about yourself and make the maximum possible contribution. I think in many cases, Australians aren't terrible at this, but I don't think we're amazing either.
Yeah. In terms of people in business that you have looked to over the years?
I don't think it's anything novel. I think from a capital allocation perspective, Warren Buffett's clearly the king of that. Always, and Charlie, obviously. It's hard to ever go past them. And just the sensibilities, Midwestern sensibilities are amazing. But this is the question everybody answers the same. So I think Jeff Bezos, in terms of the founder's founder, is probably the sort of stereotypical, because day one, and obviously retired recently, but just his ability to continually create, continue to take risk, to evolve from selling books to selling everything to AWS to Amazon Media has been incredible. It's just 4 different business lines, all incredibly successful. There's some less successful stuff in there, Amazon Fire or whatever, but his ability to continually reinvent himself and create these amazing business lines on top of other business lines is probably still the OG of entrepreneurialism. I haven't seen anybody better. Obviously, Jensen's created more wealth since, and he's done an amazing job at reinventing NVIDIA, creating some real competitive advantage. The Coda staff is unbelievable. I still think Bezos is the GOAT, though. I think what he's been able to create time after time is, and Jensen has created multiple businesses. He went from gaming chips to obviously chips that are used for AI. So he's clearly reinvented himself multiple times as well. But I think Jeff and Bill Gates is pretty incredible as well. And whilst Bill Gates hasn't been CEO of Microsoft for a long time, he's still heavily involved. A lot of the AI push has been here. Obviously some questions over his personal life more recently, but in terms of entrepreneur, he's been incredible at really understanding value drivers, how he created Windows and the shift of value in the Office suite. And then obviously more recently with understanding AI, being a biggest investor in OpenAI, which I'm not a massive fan of as a sort of enterprise, but it's just how it's gone. Gates has also been incredible. So again, none of this stuff is overly novel. People everybody knows, but just how good they've been over such a long period is pretty amazing.
What's next for the business, Adam? What's the next 5 and 10 years look like?
Yeah, we've got a lot. We've evolved the business incredibly in the last 5 years. You go back to pre-COVID, we were very much a deals-driven business, an industrials travel business. We're now a very much more technology-driven business. Our tech team's gone from 30 to 40. Overall team's doubled. It's a much more tech-heavy business. We still maintain that great travel deal DNA, that's a negotiating deal-driven DNA, but we've now got a marketplace across different platforms. We've built a subscription product, which we're super excited about, working on a points loyalty product that will launch early next year, growing a heap of our businesses across tours, flights, cruises, always two different experiences, always different verticals. But really, how do we transition the business around creating loyalty, creating not just quantum resource, but creating switching costs so customers are sticky towards us? And we launched Lux Plus 3 months ago. I've seen significant improvement in the metrics of Lux Plus members. If someone signs up for Lux Plus, they're getting double as much time on site, much more likely to purchase, much more likely to stay loyal to Luxury Escapes because they're getting these huge discounts. Instead of paying Google, we're paying the customer. We're giving you huge discounts to subscribe to Lux Plus. So for $250 a year and 500 sign up, you can save a couple of grand easily a year. So it's huge value, saving 40% off cancellation insurance products, which is significant. Saving huge money on your deal, saving money on getting private tours, get all this kind of stuff we could give, this value we give back to customers. That's been a big part of what we've been building. We want to continue to build on that. So we really become ideally the biggest travel subscription business in the world.
Yeah, okay. I get that because there's travel, and I'm talking in simplistic terms here from my knowledge of the industry, but you look at something like an Amazon Prime and the way that model works for Amazon, which almost makes it impossible for other retailers to compete with them when eventually they can sell products legitimately at cost and the subscription value is their revenue type of thing. And you can just keep putting that fee up and then no one can compete because they have to have a margin.
Yeah. And Amazon Media as well. Amazon Media, which makes $30 billion or whatever a year as well. So exactly how much it makes, but it's a super profitable part of the business. So to layer on that. So it's questionable how profitable Amazon retail actually is because AWS is such a great business, but the ability to build those moats. And so, clearly Amazon's a huge one. Accor in the travel space has done a great job with loyalty, but very few others have. But you look at Kogan in Australia, has done a great job with their loyalty platform as well, very similar to Amazon, but done an amazing job. So the ability to have a great relationship with customers is ongoing. It's what we're really trying. And we're building a mini network. Is the more members we get, the more benefits we give those members because our partners, be it hotel partners, be it cruise flight partners, are much more able to give better pricing behind the paywall. And we've got a really strict paywall. You don't see the deals, the special deals until you become a member. So we're keeping our partners' pricing sacrosanct. They can give us a better rate and not have other partners jump up and down because no one else sees it. So be able to build what we think is a really powerful loyalty program, incredible value for our customers, getting sort of a 5-10x return on your $250 a year, and unbelievable for our partners who can make lots more money. So we think we're creating a really virtuous cycle, creating that flywheel, that Amazon flywheel. More members, better product, which gives more members who give better product, and keep building on that. And it's only been 5 months, 4 months. Product's amazing. It's going to get a lot better next year as well. So super excited about the value we give to our customers and building loyalty on the back of that Qantas has done such an amazing job with. And then obviously got the status and your tiering under that. So the customers who come back time after time who spend 20, 30, 50, 100 grand with us, can we give you free airport transfers? Can we give you lounge access? Can we give you some really great value adds simply because you're a super valued loyal member to us that we're paying through what we would have paid to Google and Facebook and Meta and all these other brands, which is sort of just dead money to us. I'd rather give that value to our customers.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I think I will be subscribing to that one tonight. My wife loves your site, so I'm surprised we're not already on there. I don't think we are.
You may very well be. Yeah.
I probably are. Yeah. Adam, thanks very much, mate, for your time. It's been awesome. Really enjoy hearing your insights.
It's a pleasure. Great questions and love coming on the show.